Hey there. I am just putting the last of the first layers of paint on this painting. It's the very first layer, and it's so much fun because all you have to think about is color. Just put beautiful color on any way you want to, and make sure you have done all of the edges, because that way it'll help you later on in the process. So hi, I'm Darlene, and my nephew Charlie is filming for me. Thank you, Charlie. And this is my little studio. And what I really want to help you with today is to give you a process to take a painting from inspiration to completing. Come on in. I'm gonna show you, this is the photo that I took when I was on vacation, and I really love this bridge. Is actually red. And so when I'm getting ready to think about a painting, I'll take pictures. It's so wonderful to have that camera in your pocket. You can capture your inspiration right there. And then I put it in editing mode and I play with it and I crop it and I pull things up and over and down and back until I have a composition that I really like. And then the other thing I want to encourage you to do is think about the standard sizes of canvas, because unless you build your own, you're going to end up with one that's a 1:2 proportion, 4:5, like a 16 by 20. All that math you told yourself you'd never use when you were in school, you're going to use a little bit to make sure you have the right proportion. So when I finished, I ended up with this. I like the amount of water. I like this reflection in the water. I love that. I love the bridge. The only thing I might change when I'm actually painting is that the edge of the river disappearing hits exactly the edge of the bridge. So I'll probably move it down a little. So once you have this, you think, okay, I'm ready to paint. But no, really, I'm going to encourage you to do the next step, which is to draw it. All right, so I know I'm going to get a lot of pushback from you on this because you may not like to draw. You may not think you're very good at drawing. But this is a really important step, because when you draw something, you get to know it in a way that you don't get to know it by looking at it. If you just look at something, you can learn a lot, but when you draw it, you have to really notice. So I've got to notice how far up this shadow starts, so I'm going to make a little mark. You may have noticed I made a shape on my page. That gives me my proportion right on my page. You don't need anything fancy to do this. I'm going to draw a little bit of a line that shows this edge of that. I'm going to show a little bit. Now this is something I'm just putting in now for myself. I'm not going to paint that first, the reflection, just so for placement. All right, we're going to do the land between the sky and the land, the line there, and it kind of goes like that. I'm going to emphasize that, make it a little curlier. We've got this funny little tree that comes out like that, and then here's where the bridge starts. All right, now say here's something I didn't notice. How many trusses does it have? How many of these? You don't want to just wing that. You want to notice it. You can always wing it when you're painting. And then I'm going to start this little row of trees up higher, because again, I don't want those to touch. So it's going to kind of go like this. And instead of coming straight down, I'm going to have it go back out again for the reflection. Then we've got this little reflective area here, and this big one there. There's some white areas, and that's enough. You don't have to do a detailed drawing, but you'd be surprised at how much information soaks in when you do just this much. Don't delete this step. You will be surprised at how much it helps you as you move to the next step. So that's acrylic paint. Voila, it's already dry. So I'm going to set it on my easel. And at this point, I'm going to move this so I can see it a little better. And I can work also from my drawing if I want to. Oops, there we go. Because these are the lines I'm now going to transcribe onto my canvas with some chalk. Okay, so this is a spoiler alert for you a little bit. I'm not going to paint this painting. I'm not going to go step by step through this whole painting. There are hundreds of videos where you can follow along and paint a painting with somebody else. It's their painting. You're learning to paint. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you are painting from your own inspiration, your own photographs, I think as a teacher I can help you today to have a process that will help you be successful. All right, my little dog's making some noise out there. We'll see, Charlie. Oh, it's okay, Charlie. If he wanders in, we'll just say hello. All right, so now you can see why it's important to have the same proportions. So I'm gonna sort of sketch in this mountain area. I'm gonna put in this area of trees here. I don't need to put the bridge in because that's something I'm gonna paint one of the last things because it's on top of so much. But I've got to put the shoreline in here where the river ends, this tree area that comes in and then back out again, this area of shadow here that comes on the water, and this big area of shadow that comes like this. So I'm going to look at that. One of the reasons I love just doing it with chalk is with a little water you can just wipe it and do a different line if you want to. So I'm going to adjust this just a little bit because this is almost an interesting little zigzag thing there. And this I'm going to pull out a little sooner and end it a little sooner. Okay, so that's really very much the end of what I need to do with this first layout. I don't want a lot of detail. I don't want to get into the individual leaves or shadows. So I'm going to block in the sky first. And I always start with white. I'm just going to go down to that mountain line, even behind where the trees are. Because if I put the trees over it, I might want a little sky peeking through. So you can see I'm not being all that careful about this. And why am I putting white? Well, I chose a kind of a dark color for my ground. And rather than mixing a lot of white, mixing, I'm just going to go ahead and put a bunch of white on here right now. A lot of people have trouble with acrylics because they dry so fast and they don't feel like they have time to blend. And the answer to that is put a lot of paint on because then it won't dry so fast. All right, so skies are a lot lighter than you think they are. One of the biggest problems that people have with skies is they make them too dark, and the sky gets darker as it goes up and it gets lighter as you come down towards the horizon. So I'm just going to start blending a little blue, and you can see what a tiny amount of blue I've got there into this white, because it's much easier to go darker than it is to go lighter, believe me. All right, so we're just going to get, I can fuss with this sky later. I can put some clouds in if I want to, but remember I want it to get lighter as it goes down, so I'm going to get a little more white so it gets lighter. And I want to make sure I can see up close. You probably can't see this, but it's not covering the ground completely, so I want to make sure I have plenty of white on there so it covers the ground. And the blue I'm using, this is like a basics blue. It's pretty transparent. I like to have both opaque, semi-opaque, and semi-transparent colors on my palette. Okay, so you can see that's pretty much all I'm going to do for the sky. So the next thing is green, and it's kind of a a dirty green, so I'm going to put a little of this yellow ochre into Prussian blue, and maybe a little bit of the basic blue and a little bit of red to dull it down. Red will dull down any kind of green. Once you have green, if you want to dull it down, you're going to use a little red in it. So I'm just going to put, you know, I'm not going to paint details, but I'm going to make that edge kind of rough. I'm going to add a little blue into part of it so it gets a little darker. So all I'm doing now is I'm getting some color on the whole canvas. I don't really, again, I'm not thinking about details. I'm not painting that bridge yet. So I'm going to get color and everything. And I'm using the same brush I used for the sky, so some of that color moves in and joins it. And I'm going to add this, make this a little darker. So if you're trying to figure out the darks and lights in your painting, and that's a good idea, you might see on this that the right-hand trees are darker than the left-hand trees. See, these are catching the sun. So if you can't really see that naturally, you're going to just squint at your subject. And I'm going to put this darker bit in first, and then I can lay some lights over it, but it's nice to go ahead and get that darker bit showing. And then there's a lot of this kind of bright yellowy green going back in here. And that's, I'm just using plain old yellow ochre for this because I want that brightness underneath. And when I get ready to actually paint the water and the tree reflections, then I've got a base of this nice bright color. Again, I'm not being, you know, real detailed. Now I do have a little bit of shadow in along that one shoreline, and on my palette, if I mix Prussian blue and cadmium red medium, I get a really dark. I never really even have black on my palette because I get as dark as I need with that. A little bit more of that over here. And we're going to keep going with this dark color all the way down. So, and then I have sort of a light beigey color, so I'm going to get some of that yellow ochre, and I'm going to add a little bright yellow to it, and just a little bit of red. And I'm going to get, that's a brighter color than this reflective area. So I'm going to put some of that in with this kind of brown area on the river. And then I'm going to take some white in this section here and off it in the distance here. And I'm going to give that a little bit of that blue of the sky. So we have some of that sky reflection going on. There's a little over here. Let me get just a tiny bit of this blue again, so we get this blue going on. So basically, you're going to want to cover your whole canvas with paint just by going from one area to another like this. And it takes a little time, but you don't have to be real, you don't have to take a lot of time with this. You don't have to be real detailed. This part of the painting, you're just getting paint everywhere. And you can do a little bit of detail if you want to. But I would say you want to just basically try to get color everywhere. And if a little bit of your ground shows through, that's not a big problem. Just keep going. And then we have this really dark color. How are we doing on time, Charlie? Okay. All right. I don't want to keep you too long with this, but I don't want to leave you stranded either. because this part is kind of important. Now you want to get a nice dark color in the water here where it's got the reflection of those dark trees. So I'm going with kind of a real dark purple. Remember, I can fuss with any of this later. I can change it. I can do whatever I want. But this is just the first layer. Put some of this dark up here. Don't be afraid to mix. And you can see I'm not cleaning my brush out in between. I happen to think that having a clean brush is kind of, it's not necessary unless you're mixing a really clean, bright color like a light yellow or pale orange. The colors that are already on your brush kind of help tone down your paint. So especially when you're painting with acrylics, this is one of the kind of the secrets that help tone them down a little so they look a little more like oils. Alright, and then I've got this bit down here, it's mostly brown, so opposites on the color wheel make brown. So I'm going to mix a little red and make that kind of orange, and then we're going to add a little blue into it, and it's going to get kind of brown. And then we're going to put this brown part down here. So I like to start with orange and add blue into it for brown, but you can make brown with any opposites on the color wheel. Alright, so I'm going to do all that. So now the next step for this painting would be to start to add some detail into these trees, some darks and lights. See how the green here is much yellower. This is a different tone back in the back, and you can see that shadow in the trees. This is much darker. And then start to isolate some of these shapes in the water, including the bridge. And look how lovely when you enlarge, you can see the lines going through. So you've got that watery effect in your shadow. And this bridge was red, so I would definitely make it red when I was getting ready to paint it. Okay, so I'm going to set this aside because the next phase is to do the second big middle part. So I've started this painting, excuse me, and it's this twilight photo I took of an old barn and a house, and you can see there's a light in the window. There's a lot of trees in the sky. That's after you do all this back work, you're going to do that. And I took this photo because that was better. It showed me the actual color better. So for this picture, I'm going to stick with my big brush. I might go, this is one of my other favorite brushes, this Fitch. With her, I should have gotten, well, I do have water, but it's okay. I'm getting a little cough from talking so much. So on this painting, the middle part is actually the longest part. I'm not going to do the whole middle part for you. But this is where I'm going to start adding in some of these bushes that grow in front of the house, in between me and the house, but I'm going to still let the house show through. I'm going to get some darks in there because it's a dark night. I can always make everything darker, or I can go back and make it lighter. You know, you never want to feel like you're just trapped with what it is you're painting. So I'm going to get a little darker here, and we'll just start moving in just some darker. I'm going to actually make a little really dark. The Prussian blue and cadmium red medium are just awesome. They get nice and dark, almost, it really is like black, and if you add white to it, it goes gray. So if you don't know how to mix gray, that'll, black is so strong, it really takes over everything else in a, not in a good way. So we got trees, we got another big bush here. I'll go with a slightly different color. I keep a limited palette because my brain doesn't like to remember a lot. And if I don't have very many colors on my palette, then I can remember how I mix things. And it's just a very easy way. Like if I've got to go back and adjust something or remix a color, I don't have to remember from 17 colors what I used to make those colors, and I can go back and match them pretty well. And I'm going to go back and add some of this back in, and we're going to go with this land kind of rolls down, so I'm going to go back and make that show up a little more. We'll pull some light in over here and a little bit here. And then there's kind of a fence in this, so I am going to put a little, get some white, make it a little darker. And it kind of goes, and it's going to get covered with some more plants in front. So I'm just going to make like a bit of this fence because it's going to get covered up. Now if you want to go to a different color, you can just wipe your brush out. And then I'm going to go with a much darker green. So I'm going to mix the Prussian blue and cadmium red and a little bit of the yellow ochre, and I'll get a nice dark green. A little different shade than what's in front. This is some kind of a little garden that was there. All right, I'm not going to do too much more on that. But you can kind of see how you just sort of build up on top of what's already there. And then when I get ready to paint those leaves in the sky, I can just do some brush strokes that'll look kind of leafy. But I'm going to leave a lot of that color there behind it. This is a tree that's coming over in front. There's ones in back. This particular photograph I liked because there was so much in the way of trees. And there's one kind of coming up, that detail shot I took. There's one that kind of comes up right through this sort of sunny thing. And you can just add some of this, and then you can start adding the leaves in. And they're heavier in places. Now I have to work on this a lot more. And there's a lot of dark back in here. So all of this sky would get kind of covered with leaves. Then I would want to go back and do some more work here. There's a lot of work to do in the middle part. You're going to do all this tree overlay and details in the grass, a little bit of details in this path so you can see it a little better. So it shows up. You can add some light. But the thing I want to show you is if you lose some of your color in the sky, you can go back and brighten it, you know, to help make it look that really bright. You can add bits of color back in between those dark leaves, and that helps make it that brilliant sky that you were inspired by. You can add it back in. So you're just going to keep painting, and you can go back and forth between the sky and like that. All right, I'm not going to paint the whole painting. This is my little idea of a painting, and this stage will probably take me a good 3 hours to do this middle part, to adjust all the light, to add some light back into the house, to get the light right and the colors right in the sky, with all of this foliage covering the sky, and then to make it so this foreground isn't quite so dark, because I want to be able to see a little bit of it, you know, add some lights into it. So that's a process. And you just have to flow with it. And honestly, you're going to get to the point where you've got what I call the ugly phase. This is kind of in the ugly phase right now, where you're in the middle of things and it doesn't look right yet. You've got to not evaluate your painting based on where it is now. You've got to keep the image in your mind of where you're going and just keep painting. Because if you stop, it's going to stay ugly. You got to keep painting or it won't get better. So this will be very nice when I'm done, but I'm not going to bore you by continuing to paint. And the idea is I want you to paint your own paintings. Now this one is a painting that actually is kind of finished, but this is the end, the very end, where after you finish the middle part, you want to sit that painting against the wall and you want to look at it in your living area for about a week. And you'll start to see things that bother you, that you need to tweak. You might have thought you were done, but now you need to spend some time getting your last little bits done. And in this one, I need to add just a little bit of the texture that I have here. See, I don't have it any back here at all. So I need to add a little bit of texture going back there. So just not big lines, just little bits, just so it looks like it goes with the rest of the painting. And I'm going to do the same with this little shadow area. I'm going to make those texture marks. I'm going to add a little more of that magenta that I've got going down here. In fact, I'm going to add some of this in a softer way, more transparent way, so it's not so dotty and it's got a little bit longer pieces of it. So we'll just do that. And then after you've done these adjustments, you don't want to do too much at a time. You want to kind of get some done and then get back from it 6 or 7 or 8 feet. And then decide. I'm happy with the sky. The other thing I really wanted to do on this was to add a tiny bit of shadow to some of the pier edges. So I'm going to add a little bit darker edge here and there. Not on all of them, but just on some of it, to make it have a little bit more shadow. Not a lot, I'm just doing a little bit. And only you can know what needs to be done. You can ask somebody who's your teacher, somebody you trust, but please don't ask a friend or your husband or your wife. They will not help you. They'll confuse you. It won't be good. So ask somebody you trust, or either look yourself and get it to the point where you want it. All right, now, the other thing I had not done to this yet is paint the edges. It's got the ground on it. I actually did kind of a gray, just a very gray ground on this. So I want to do sort of a neutral kind of bluey, darky kind of color. So I'm just going to take and I'm going to run my brush along this edge. And if you hold it sideways like this, it's easier. Don't try to paint it like this. Hold it sideways and you'll get a crisper line around that edge. So you're going to paint the whole edge all the way around. And then you're also going to put a wire on it so it's complete, so you can hang it. You're going to make sure it's signed and you're going to photograph it. Okay, so make sure you do all of that when you finish, because you don't want to have to do all those steps when you're getting ready to have a show or sell it to someone. So, gosh, I think that's it, Charlie. I hope this is helpful to you. I feel like as a teacher, these are things that will really help you. And I hope you let me know how your next painting goes. Thanks.